Alright guys, today is the start of the 7-day work week on the two-door hardtop to get it finished. So it is Monday, June 5th, 2023, and this is day one. So the next door neighbors, their lawn service has showed up and they're working on their yard, mowing it right now. So I'm not going to open the garage door because it'll stir up all the dust and all that stuff, and it'll come in here basically and get on my car. So gonna kind of hold off a minute. So today's project, I actually need to go get some spark plugs and some spray glue, which is going to kill a couple hours of time. Let's see. I think what I'm going to do is work on the trunk upholstery. I think that's really what I'm going to try to focus on. I think I am out of spray glue. I'll have to go dig at my cabinet. I might have one in there, who knows, but you know, I need to get my professionally installed light system going here. Okay, well, I'm gonna get started. At least see if I got spray glue for sure, because I need to check a cabinet over there, but I gotta move some stuff to get the door open. Alright guys, so I didn't end up putting the nitrous kit on the car yet. I'm going to put it on, but it may be a month or two before I get to it. It's a nitrous oxide kit that I bought new back in 2010 or 2013 or 14, somewhere in there. But it's a plate kit, and that nitrous plate that goes underneath that carburetor, it's almost like a spacer plate. It has two spray bars in it. It's like 3/8 thick or a 1/2 inch thick, so that's going to raise the carburetor up that high. So when that carburetor goes up, it's going to make my cold air pipe and air cleaner not go in together. So that was problem number one. So that's just, it would take a lot of work. I'd have to rework that cold air pipe mounting and everything. And to try to make everything work without making it look like you can tell it was an afterthought, you know, by adding something or bolting something together that looks like an afterthought. So anyway, the other problem was the fuel pressure regulator bracket right here. All of this is hard mounted, so it would go up with the carb. So the bracket wouldn't be long enough to bolt to the water pump. So I'd have to basically add metal to the end of that. And then it'd have to be metal finished and probably primed and blocked and then painted. So there'd be two big things to have to rework, and I just don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do at a later date is I'm going to get a nitrous fogger nozzle. I'm going to mount it in the air cleaner tube. That way it's a little bit, you know, less of a headache than having to rework a bunch of stuff, and it won't raise the carb up because it's a fogger nozzle. But I'll have to get the fogger nozzle. I'll have to buy two jets to put in the fogger nozzle, and I'll also have to buy the bung kit because I don't want to weld anything on an already painted part. They sell an actual bolt-on bung. So I'll do that, and anyway, it'll end up looking cleaner anyway without having the lines running out the front of the carburetor and over and out the back around the side. So it'll end up working out better, but I'm not going to worry about it right now because I don't really need the nitrous right now. So that'll be an upgrade later. All right, one of the things I want to talk about is front end alignment at home on these cars. Now I do have a video on my channel, and it's pretty far down the list on it. I show how to do a front end alignment at home, and this is the way I've always done these cars and even G-bodies, and I've not had an issue. They always drove straight down the road at highway speed. You can take your hand off the wheel, and also when you turn a corner, they correct themselves. You know, as you start to, you know, as the car starts to straighten up out of the curve or turn from a stop sign or whatever, the steering wheel automatically wants to go back to center. And I've never had a problem with any of the other Tri-5s except this car. Now, this car in particular, I did put tubular control arms on. It's my first Tri-5 to put control arms on. I've always done the old stock control arms like this car has. And I have not had that issue, but this car, when I pull up to a stop sign and like I turn right, when I make the turn, I kind of have to help the steering wheel go back to straight. You can tell it's kind of trying to, it's just not, you know, really doing it on its own like it should. So I called one of my mentors, and I got to give him a shout out. It's Archie. I've known this guy since I was probably 7 years old. He was one of my uncle's best friends. and he's a real knowledgeable guy. He's built a lot of stuff. I need to see if I can get over to his shop one of these days and see if he'll let me video what he's working on, and maybe some of his stuff out back. He's got a lot of stuff over there. Anyway, it'd be neat, another video. So anyway, with this car not wanting to correct itself, I gave Archie a call and I asked him, because he's had a couple of frame machines through the years, and I told him what it was doing and asked him how I could fix that. His first question he asked me, he goes, "Do you have aftermarket control arms?" And I said, yes. So I have tubular control arms on the car, because tubular control arms, they're made differently than a stock control arm. These do. They have a little bit more degrees of something in them. I don't remember what it's supposed to give you. But anyway, what he told me to do, he asked me how I aligned the front end, and I told him, and I'm going to run you guys through that real quick. But he told me to do two things differently, and I tried it. And after I got the fuel pump on the car and got it back running, I went out and drove it, and it's an amazing difference. Now it corrects itself rather aggressively, so I think it's awesome. So anyway, I love it. I'm not going to take the car to alignment shop. It doesn't need it. So what I usually do, this is how I've always done it, is I use a bubble level from Walmart, a plastic one that is cut to fit the rim, and I basically bubble level it here, right here. So I cut that plastic $7 bubble level that I get at Walmart. I leave that straight across bubble. I cut off the 45-degree angled one at the bottom, but I cut it until it fits right on the rim edge, the rim bead. And I put it up there like that, and I look at that bubble up here, and all I do is I add shims. I add an even stack up here, front and back of those two studs up there. I add an even amount of shims until that bubble's dead center. So anyway, I do it to both sides, and that's how I do that. Now when I set my toe on the front, that's, you know, for the wheels to be straight, I've always used this old curtain rod here that I got at Walmart. I think it was like $5 or $8 or something. This is a pretty thick-walled steel one. It's not real flimsy, but it's a piece that goes inside itself. Now what I do is I get up under the front of the car and I stretch that out till it goes to the back side, around the back of the rim bead. I don't ever do it to the tire, I do it to the rim bead. And I take a fine tip, or this is an ultra fine tip, Sharpie, and I mark it. And then I collapse it and I go around to the back of the wheel and I do the same thing and mark it again. So then I get out from under the car and I lay this down and I stretch it out and I look at the width of the difference. And all I do is adjust the tie rod until I get it dead zero. So I just zero it out. There is another way you can do it, and it's actually the way that I just did it recently, because this is kind of a pain in the butt with the car this low. Because you don't want to jack the car up and do this, because it'll have the front end all out of whack. You got to have the weight of the car on it. So also, if you had your car jacked up or something and then you let it down, you need to at least roll it forward and back a little bit and then do it so it kind of settles where it needs to. But anyway, we took like 6-inch long cut pieces of 2x4 and I laid them right here. And then I have like some 2-foot long pieces of square tubing, and I lay it across the rim and the tire, right across it, right up against it. Because if you just put something like a 2x4, like a 2-foot long piece right there, it's not going to work because it's going to be bulged. That tire has all the weight of the cars on it, so this is bulged out right here. So you got to get above it up here where it's flat. So put a little 2x4 or a brick or something the same on both sides, and then put your, you know, long pieces of whatever there. And then you can use a tape measure if you have another person to hold one end of it, which my dad held the end of it, and then I read the tape on the other side from the back, and we did the front. So he told me to put an 1/8-inch toe in the front, because I had it zeroed out, and I've never had an issue on all my Tri-5s. They've always drove straight and they corrected themselves, except this car. And I don't know if it's from the tubular control arms or, you know, I don't really know. So I adjusted the tie rod to get an 1/8-inch toe. Now another friend of mine, Jeremy, that was here over the weekend, I hadn't seen him in 10 years, he has an alignment, he has a mechanic shop and he has an alignment machine. And I was telling him about this, and he said he likes to put that 1/8-inch toe in on this tie rod over here so it'll follow the crown on the road. So Anyway, that is actually the one I did, and my buddy Archie didn't tell me that, but Jeremy did, so I'm glad I did this side. So if you're going to do your 1/8 inch toe in, do it on the passenger side tie rod sleeve. So anyway, Archie said to put an 1/8 inch toe in, don't do it dead zero straight. The other thing he told me was the even stacks of A-arm shims. I put in an even stack up here to get that bubble level dead center. He said to take one of the thick shims out of the front and put it in the back on both sides. And I did that. So what that does is it cocks the spindle back and it makes the car want to go straighter. And he said that's how the front engine dragsters are done. The spindles are cocked. So that was pretty interesting information to get. And you know, you're not going to know, because you see a lot of cars after they come out of alignment, you'll notice that they have thinner shim pack in the front than the back, or vice versa. So you know, there's no really way of doing that unless you have a machine that does that. But doing it with redneck tools like I am, you know, I can't do that. So I put the 1/8 inch toe in it and took one shim out of the front and put in the back, and I took it out and drove it, and I got up here and turned the corner and it corrected itself really quick. So this thing drives totally different now and I love it. So I think the alignment side of it is fixed. So now I'm going to go ahead and run you guys through what I did to get the bog out of the carburetor, because some of you guys, if you're running a 4150 or you're planning on running a 4150 style carburetor, which is basically one that looks kind of like the old school Holly, and you have a bog, like when you hit the throttle and it bogs, I'm going to show you how to get rid of that. All right, now I'm going to give you just a quick cut and dry tutorial on how to get a bog out of a Holly style carburetor. And it's pretty simple. I mean, there are other things you can do, and sometimes you have to do the other things along with what I'm going to show you to get the bog out. But you know, for fairly mild street car stuff, this, or a driver, this usually does it 99% of the time. So you put these carburetors out of the box, you put it on your car, and you tune your metering screws, and you take it out for a test drive, and you smash the gas, and it backfires and then picks up and goes. Or you know, it bogs down a little bit and then it picks up and goes like hell. What you need to do, if your ignition timing is where it needs to be, because slow timing will cause the same issue, so make sure your timing is where it needs to be. But if it's still doing it after your timing's where it needs to be, you need to take the squirter out right here. This is the front of the carburetor, and that's a squirter right here. It has a big Phillips screw in it. And underneath that screw is a countersunk thin, paper thin washer. And then underneath the squirter itself, where it screws to the main body, is another thin washer. So, and actually when you buy a new set of those washers, it's just 2 flat washers. And when you put that flat washer into that screw and tighten it down, it makes it countersunk. So anyway, you take that screw out. Be careful not to knock one of the, you know, like that screw, that washer on the bottom. Make sure it doesn't fall down in the carburetors. You'll have to fish it out of there. Anyway, when you get the squirter out, this is what it looks like. And they have a number on them right here. And most usually, like the 600s, the 650s, and 700s, 750s, whatever, they have a 31. It's just pretty common. You can see the 31 on that. Now, it has 2 orifices. There's one there, and there's one there. So what you need to do is put in a larger one. So these things are pretty expensive. I don't remember. They're expensive to me, let me say that. And you have to have several on hand to keep going out and trying. I don't do that. I drill them, but I have a bunch of these extra laying around here, so I don't care. I've got a box over there. It's probably about, I don't know, 4, 5, 6, maybe even 10 in it. And then I've got 4 in this tray, my jetpack tray. But I drill them out with little small cheapy index drill bits. So there are people that will say you're not supposed to drill squirters and you're not supposed to drill jets. And I don't know why, because they're not cast with the holes in them. They're drilled. So anyway, the biggest thing when you drill that squirter out, when you drill that through and that drill bit comes out in the middle, it's going to have shrapnel. So you'll want to go in there with a fine jeweler's file. You can get a pack of these of different shapes, like at Harbor Freight or Amazon or whatever, and they're only like $4 for a jeweler's file set. This is a super fine file for jewelry, and this is a round one. So I just go in there and I file that shrapnel off, and then I always double check with a loop to make sure there's nothing in there, because you don't want that stuff in your engine, you know what I mean? But Anyway, that is the biggest thing about drilling something, especially aluminum. But anyway, I drill them out. So I always check these with a digital caliper before I drill, just to make sure the drill bits are what they say they are and make sure they're not put in the wrong little slot. So I've got a little cheat sheet on here. So that .80 will go right into that orifice by itself without drilling it. I can slide that drill bit through there. So what I did is I went to 33, put it back on the car, took it out, took my foot off the brake, smashed the gas pedal, and it still bogged a little bit. Anyway, long story longer, I wound up at a 40, and I tried all of those first, and it got better and better and better. Now, the downside of drilling a squirter, if that's the only one you got, if you drill too far, you know, you're screwed, because you're gonna have to go get another one. But for me, I have them on hand, so I don't care if I drill them. But I like to go in stages instead of just jumping real big, and that way, you know, I don't have to pull it back out and dig out another one and drill the next size, or one size lower, because I went too far. So that is how you basically do a squirter, and that will 9 out of 10 times take your bog out. Now, I did have a buddy's car that I worked on several years back, really big dome pistoned 454, I think it's a 468, and it was a 4-speed car, and it was a quick fuel carburetor, and I want to say it was an 850. I think it was a double pumper, and he had a really bad bog. So I kept up on the squirters, and it got better and better and better. I just couldn't get it completely out of there. We ended up having to mess with the pump cams. So this is a pump cam right here. Now these are on your Holley carburetor, Holley style carburetor right here. It's a plastic thing, and it's basically kind of like the cam lobe on your engine, the cam in your engine. So all you're doing is changing the profile of the lobe, and some of these can give you a more aggressive pump shot. And we ended up buying an assortment pack of those and messing with them, and we ended up getting it where there's no bog, and it was an instantaneous hit. But there's a screw right here, and there's actually another slot here, but you can take that screw out of the one that's already in it, the factory one, and you can take that screw out and you can rotate that cam and put that screw right back in there and try it that way. But for me, the cheapest, most effective for my mild stuff has always been just a squirter upgrade or change to go bigger. Now, when you get one, you can also have a rich bog, like you're getting too much fuel, and it kind of acts a little bit differently. It kind of stutters a little bit before it goes. Instead of just the usual fall flat on its face and then go, it usually stutters a little bit. That is too rich. Now, the other thing that is very important is you really need a vacuum gauge, and vacuum gauges are cheap. They're like 15 bucks at the parts store, probably cheaper than that on Amazon. And it doesn't matter how accurate it is, you know what I mean? It's going to be pretty close if it's super cheap. But the power valve in the carburetor is in the front metering block. They have numbers stamped on them, and they usually come out of the box with a 6.5. So what you want to do is, after your engine's up to operating temperature, is have somebody put their foot on the brake and put it in gear and hold it, and you want to check your vacuum reading and see what it is. So once you find out what that number is, you cut it in half, and that is the size power valve you need, because they come in like a 6.5, 7.5, 8.5. They're smaller ones too, like 4.5, 5.5. But anyway, so if you're getting 13 inches of vacuum in gear, you cut that number in half, which is a 6.5. So that you kind of need that, because the incorrect size power valve sometimes can cause cruising problems. You're cruising down the highway 65 miles an hour, and you're kind of on and off the throttle, you know, light to keep the steady pace. And when you go to give it a little bit of gas, it kind of stutters and kind of misses a little bit. That is your power valve sizing most of the time. But the ignition timing is the most important, because if you've got the ignition timing pretty retarded, the car is probably always going to have a lazy throttle feel to it, and sometimes it can act like a bog. But how I test mine after making the squirter change is I get the car up to temp, and I'll take it out on the road, and I'll pull up to a dead stop, and I'll take my foot off the brake and then immediately smash the throttle pedal all the way to the floor instantaneously, and it'll either bog or it'll go. So after I got done drilling mine to a 40 on the squirter, I can do that with this car and it immediately annihilates the rear tires. I don't have any hesitation, no nothing. It just takes it. And the reason I probably had to go to a 40, I'm just assuming, is it's because it's a 406 cubic inch engine with a 650 carburetor. So I really want a 750. I'm gonna have to wait till later, and this will work just fine. And I may not ever change it. You know what I mean? But I just wanted to give you guys a few little tips for you DIY guys at home with not big pocketbooks, because for me, I'm not going to go down and spend $70 on a bunch of different squirters to just come back and try them, because at the end of it, you're going to end up with one out of all the ones you bought, and they're just going to go in a box somewhere. So you can use your $3 drill set and drill them out. So for me, I'm always on a budget, so that's just what I do. And I don't care if you disagree or not, it works for me. But thanks guys for watching.